Lights, camera, good. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. My name is Lathan. I'll be talking to you about simplifying Microsoft architectures with AWS services. Hopefully, at the end of this presentation, you'll see how simpler it is to actually use AWS for your Microsoft workloads, for your Microsoft development, for your Microsoft maintenance on all your Microsoft workload needs. I have been very deep in the weeds before joining AWS. I was a Microsoft Most Valuable Professional for many years. I went through Microsoft Certified Master Certification and Training. I worked with various Ranger teams, SQL Ranger teams, TFS Ranger team. I worked with Microsoft Research. Then I started working very much deep in the weeds with all things AWS, and I've been here for over 2 years now. Working with all crazy and beautiful things on our awesome platform. So let me start with the challenge. So what's the challenge? The challenge really is, how can we simplify our infrastructure environment? What can AWS do for my Microsoft workloads to simplify them, to make it simpler? What about things, very important things like Active Directory? All your corporate applications, your changes, SharePoints, Dynamics, your System Center, and so on. What about SQL? How do I deploy all of this, and how do I do it in a repetitive, stable way, in a predictable way as well? What about any good migration suggestions I may have for you? How do we actually go over to AWS? And also how it can, most importantly, how it can help me simplify my legacy .NET applications. And for that specific one, there will be a more in-depth session that I will be doing on a Wednesday, specifically with .NET microservices, and it will be with our customer Experian. I really implore you to come and see that one too. And then I'll be talking about simplifying the management of your Microsoft workloads on AWS. And this big heart that you see here is really the love that we have for Microsoft, and Microsoft has for us, because we are one of the biggest Microsoft license holders, the biggest, in fact, in the world. And we love each other, we integrate with each other, we do a lot of things together, and all this sort of stuff. Although it seems like we had competition, that's rather competition than competition most of the time. These are so many different services we built specifically for Microsoft workloads in AWS, and more. You'll see a lot of them being announced in this reInvent as well, and I'll mention some of them too, and so on. Start off, where do we start off? How do I go into AWS? What is the first thing that I need to plan for? Well, that would be VPC Design Patterns, right? And let me ask you, and this is something also we call a landing zone when it comes to migrations and so on. So a lot of you, I'm guessing, know what VPC is, right? It's your basically your network boundary, right, within AWS that you're going to have. Two patterns. One, the shared services one, where you can have a central VPC, like a hub and spoke model, where it actually goes through peering, it connects to multiple other VPCs, and where the hub actually contains your replicated services, it can contain your domain controllers, it can contain System Center, it can contain your central SQL farm, depending on how you manage your SQL servers in your organization. It can contain all of those. The gotcha with that one is that you can't actually the individual VPCs can't see each other. So A, B, and C will see the shared VPC, but A can't see B, and B can't see C, and so on. So it doesn't have transitive properties. So what do we do if we want something to have transitive properties, and we still have workloads that multiple teams work on, they own multiple different accounts, and they have different VPCs in them? Well, we use something called a transitive VPC, and we do. If you favorite search engine, you put AWS Transit VPC, you will not only see the documentation on the Transit VPC, you will also see a CloudFormation, which is a one-click way of deploying this. And that involves having two CSRs, two basically routers. This is called headquarters that in this particular case, and they would be doing routing to PCs, and a very quick way in which you can kind of add and tack them on one by one. So what that allows you to do is that couple of things that are really good about that is all of your traffic will be going through these two CSRs, meaning that you can do any type of network filtering, monitoring, and all this sort of stuff in a very kind of consolidated way. It is kind of fully available because it's running on 2, it can run on more. However, it's also, you want to make sure that you're using the right instance sizes with the right bandwidth for these CSRs, because they will be consuming all the bandwidth. And all the applications will be consuming that same bandwidth. And the second thing is, in this case, each of these, A will be able to see B, and B will be able to see C, and they'll be able to route to one another, in a transitive way, right? So, what about Active Directory? Simplest way you can possibly do, the easiest setups we've always done and all that, literally just put down 2 domain controllers up in AWS, establish VPN or use Direct Connect. VPN is, as you guys know, IPsec tunnel. Direct Connect is really basically a lease line or a dark fiber, whatever you want to call it, direct connection between us and you and your data center. And that'll give you dedicated bandwidth as well. It doesn't go over the internet like VPN does. And for sometimes for security purposes, because it uses BPG, you can actually use VPN over Direct Connect if necessary. So back to the whole AD, you just drop 2 DCs, you extend effectively your Active Directory into the cloud. You configure DNS forwarders and up and running. You can start deploying your applications in there like nothing, right? And that's really what it is. For all of the Microsoft applications, they're very chatty. They need to have DCs in the immediate vicinity in order to have performance or adequate performance, specifically enterprise applications. Great things now. In the past, you could also have those DCs deployed on EC2s and with ADFS. So you could have ADFS configured with ADFS proxies, and those you can establish federation between your data center as well as other partners that you might be with, that you need to provide single sign-on access to your applications or to any of the workloads or anything like that. But more importantly, some managed Active Directory, AWS Directory Services, Microsoft Active Directory that you can use in conjunction with ADFS. You couldn't do that before. You can now use it also with like SharePoints and the likes and all that. There's quite a bit that you can do. In addition, very recently we've released Standard Edition. Before we provided Enterprise Edition, managed Active Directory. Managed means that we manage it. You don't have to worry about it. We worry about it being available. We worry about it being up and running. We worry about all those aspects of it. We do provide you administrator access in the whole thing in order to manage your OUs and all that sort of stuff. However, we take that off your hands and we manage the heavy stuff. And like I said, now it's become increasingly more popular, literally with all the customers I've been implementing so far. They love it more and more. The fact that they don't have to worry about it and they don't have to manage it has been a massive thing. In conjunction with that, the only difference is if you were to drop your own Active Directory in the cloud, like I said, you can extend it, but if you were to use our managed Active Directory, you would establish an AD trust, whether that be a two-way or one-way trust. And in that way, you can effectively, extend into the cloud using that. It can either go over the VPN or over Direct Connect once again. And that way, you don't have to worry about too much about from a deployment perspective about managing the infrastructure behind it, but you can also you still manage centrally all of your policies and things and make sure that those are distributed to all the managed Active Directories in AWS. What we added to that as well, we added patterns, as you can see, for integration of managed Active Directory through ADFS, AD-Sync, and to Azure AD. So you can now, those one that I showed you, really hybrid scenarios, right? Once you extend AD, you can kind of build out any hybrid scenario between us and your data center or any other platform. But now you can also integrate with Office 365, hybrid scenarios between Office 365 and, let's say, SharePoints and CRMs or anything that you might be running on AWS, right? And you can also have hybrid scenarios between us and even Azure and all that, since it's Azure Active Directory that we're really integrating with. So what does that configuration look like? You would basically add 2 containers to AWS Microsoft Active Directory for use by ADFS. Deploy ADFS integrated with Azure Active Directory, synchronize users, and voila, using your Azure AD Connect, and voila, you can sign in using Office 365 to your workloads on AWS. Massive thing, awesome thing. You can federate also directly to managing our services and a whole bunch of other things. This has been a winner with a lot of our customers that are kind of still on the fence between the two. And that also ensures you that you can really kind of go between things and be very nimble when it comes to cloud. More, on a SQL side of things, we have, and talk about that in more detail. Now we have 2 flavors really. We have SQL, deploying SQL on EC2 yourself, and we have RDS for SQL, which is meaning that this is our own managed Microsoft SQL Server. Choose the version. You can choose if you wanted to have deployed and replicated across multiple availability zones. And more importantly, when I say availability zones, please remember that availability zones, in our case, very different to any other cloud provider, any other cloud platform, drastically different. Our availability zones are clusters of data centers. Each availability zone is a cluster of data centers that are geographically displaced from one another, and they're on a different fault plane, they're a different flood plane. There's not a single natural or otherwise disaster that can take more Active Directory. For us, availability zone. For us, normal deployment across 2 or more availability zones is equal to what used to be a high-end DR scenario, or high-end like deploying and DRing into like really different colo or something like that, right? Amazon RDS will give you this multi-AZ deployment. It will allow you to automate your backups, a whole bunch of other things that provide you with scalability, high availability, patching, so OS patching, all these things, maintenance, all these things that you wouldn't have to worry about. We worry about, care of that for you. We manage it for you. If you want to do that yourself, you can deploy it on EC2, and then basically everything above OS install and power, HVAC, and that's kind of you worry about what you manage if that's what you insist on managing. Now, one of the gotchas around RDS and deploying on EC2 was basically there's some limitations around what you can use RDS for. There was limitations around the sizes of databases, and I implore you to look at those up. Those are constantly changing. Now they're in many, many terabytes and so on. There were limitations around which enterprise applications we'll be using in it all. We still recommend that you use SQL on AWS, on EC2 if you're using things like SharePoint and Dynamics and so on. However, those things are rapidly changing, and I really implore you to keep your eye, especially on announcements that are coming up and all that, with respect to that. Having said that, for .NET developers, has been a godsend, and a lot of our customers are running not only the .NET developers, but anybody who has been using SQL in some other way, except like for enterprise applications. They really welcomed using SQL on RDS. If you go right now, if you plug into your favorite search server, AWS Quick Start, you'll be able to scroll down and you'll see a Quick Start for SQL Server. And when you deploy it in your own account, it will actually this entire setup that you see, the entire infrastructure. It will deploy a network layer, it will deploy a security layer, it will deploy Active Directory, it will deploy full always-on synchronous configuration between 2 or 3 nodes, depending on what you choose when you deploy it, with a file share and witness server, you'll be able to use this. You'll be able to actually kick the tires and see how it is. But to give you a good representation of this, I've been doing some very massive implementations and migrations of SQL recently with our customers. And one of the recent ones that I've done, it was literally for a 46 terabyte SQL cluster. And we've used this Quick Start to start it off, and it was compliant with most of this is a very important customer, and the application is actually public facing and cannot afford any downtime. We've used the Quick Start for the most part, and it was mostly compliant. We had to do some adjustments and all that, but Quick Start was very much applicable to the use case that we needed. So that to say, like, how the level of detail that we've put into actually the Quick Starts is that high. I will be talking about this also in our migration scenario. This is going to be a pattern also for migration, but it's also a pattern between establishing a multi-region always-on availability group, or a way to establish a multi-platform availability group between us, your data center, or another platform, if need be. So what that is that we can, by means of establishing a VPN, with whether it's with another region, with another platform, or whether it's with on-premise data center, we can have asynchronous commit and async remote replica on that side of things. Basically, with it, we can cut over later on. We can drop another DC in it, and so on. And that way, we can really, not only migrate to AWS, but also extend the same application you may be running in one region in AWS to multiple regions, and so on, and kind of extend, one by one to literally all the regions around the world if necessary. And for those of you that are still fond of failover cluster instances, or FCIs, so way back in the days, almost a decade back, this is something that we mostly used right before this always-on stuff and all that, in the days when only failover cluster instances and log shipping was around. We would configure 2 FCIs in active-active or active-passive, and then we would configure log shipping to a DR site. Why we needed log shipping, or we would do some sort of base replication, is because FCR share the same storage, and that means it only really provides redundancy between nodes in the cluster. And if the storage is gone, it doesn't matter how many nodes you have and whether they're active-active or active-passive, your SQL is gone. So there always had to be some sort of replication. If you want to go old school way, you can. We also have third-party partners like Sios and all that allow you, that provide replication solutions for your FCIs if you want to run them, right, with shared storage. This is one of my favorite slides. Actually, I have this as like a poster, and a lot of our customers use this as a poster. And it kind of shows, the system of all the things immediate things that can simplify your Windows architecture, infrastructure specifically, and all that. So you can see, starting from the beginning, we have DNS with Route 53. We have web application firewalls with our CloudFront, with our CDNs. We got AWS Shield, which is top-end security protection that we provide for all of us, all of our top-tier customers and anybody who's willing to have it. And then for any of the public-facing or internally-facing, none of the servers, whether they be front-end servers and so on, need to be in a DMZ or a public subnet in this case. We don't use net instances anymore. We use net gateways now, which is a managed way of netting to provide updates for your servers that are running in public subnets that need to get stuff from outside without being outside. We have WAP and proxies. You can use RDGWs that we deploy for you as well to get in as kind of a bastion server. And then we provide autoscale. Biggest challenges that I've been working with a lot of our customers because a lot of .NET applications are very bloated. A lot of web front on enterprise applications are very bloated, and there's no really very quick way of expanding those and adding those as scalability need goes up, right? Or for self-healing purposes as well. So I've been working on ways in which we can actually speed this up by updating AMIs, which are used by auto-scaling groups through launch configuration to quickly stand up these instances, add them to the topology of your application and to topology like your SharePoint and so on and so forth. And if you want to talk about that, I'd love to talk your ears off. I used to be a SharePoint MVP back in the day. So these are the things that I've been working with a lot of customers as well on these, and especially on the .NET side of things. Come to me after the session. Then auto-scaling on the app server side of things, thanks to the server application model that has been a while on a .NET side of things and on enterprise application side of things, those things can expand quite quickly. Making use of something like auto-scaling is enormous. This is really what our top-tier customers use, when they want to scale insane amounts of millions and gazillions users per second that need to get in. Needless to say that this will work. This is the power that it brings to running .NET applications and Microsoft workloads in general. Behind it, we have RDS, we have SQL. We can either configure and install our own domain controller, or we can use the managed Active Directory that I talked about just now. We can connect back via VPN or Direct Connect. We can then use our storage services, which has 11 nines durability and have direct access through the VPC endpoint to it. Can directly access it without actually having to go over the internet and back in. Same way, we can actually have a VPC endpoint for our Dynamo NoSQL database, and so on and so forth. There are a number of the DevOps services for deployment that I'm going to touch on in a bit. Configuration, system manager being the best one. I will talk about that in a bit. Also KMS for encryption, data at rest, Cloud HSM for hardware encryption side of things. Any of your and I'll be talking about between that and kind of encryption in transition, you're going to have most of your compliance covered, and you'll see a lot of our services also are compliant, and compliance for more and more of our serverless. Or our serverless services is coming up, making them more applicable for serverless architectures that I'm going to be talking about. So, how do we simplify the deployment of all this? CloudFormation. So, one thing that I kind of heavily underestimated way back when I just started working in AWS is just how powerful CloudFormation is. So CloudFormation effectively allows you to have, it's a schema-based language in JSON or YAML. You define literally all of the services that you want to deploy, all of the servers, the entire infrastructure. It can either implicitly take into account what are the dependencies for what you need to have, and you can also establish those dependencies yourself. Before I used to do that, like with PowerShell and stuff, it was insane. It would time out, it wouldn't be consistent. Sometimes it would fail, sometimes it would run. That's not the case with CloudFormation. CloudFormation knows AWS resources really well and allows you really to create a very good checks around deploying services on top of the servers that you're deploying within the infrastructure. Never mind the actual networking, never mind the actual security layers and so on and so forth. It is cut down projects that I have on that used to last something like 6 months. Now I could do the same in 2 weeks or less. And I've had from start to production, actual deployments of like massive infrastructures and stuff in such short time. It's a true story. So that's because I can, with confidence in a repeatable way, redeploy things and configurations that I've done in the past with some modification that the customer requires. Example that I gave with SQL with the customer early on, that's one of the very good examples, right? Is that reusing that same, reusing that same, I want to say IP that we've built, right? And steps that we've built. The way it works, you create a template, you can create anything. Honestly, I use Visual Studio. We have Visual Studio AWS Toolkit. I suggest you do that. I'll be talking on a little bit more about that later as well. Amazing thing. You can use that. You can use things like Troposphere that actually go ahead and build out programmatically CloudFormations, or you can just do it yourself with your with your own hands, which I actually most of the time do. I just do minor adjustments and stuff. Our service takes and creates a form based on the properties that you're feeding it, and you can reuse the same CloudFormation for like dev, test, and production, right? You can just note what you want for each environment that you're putting in. Literally just that. You upload it, it starts building. I told you to go ahead and search for your AWS Quick Starts. When you search for it, for the first link that you see, scroll down, you'll see a whole bunch of these. There's the SQL Server, there's Link, there's Exchange, there's SharePoint. All of these are production-like deployments of these instances that you can go ahead and deploy in your account today, right now. Okay, big deal. For those of you that are taking pictures, these slides will be made available, I think, shortly afterwards for everybody. Simplify migration. Okay, so there are third-party tools and partners and ISVs that I wanted you guys to see here. We kind of separated, and you'll see also from our migration hub, into discovery and planning, server and database migrations, data transfers, and application monitoring and profiling. And you can see we have Cloudamize, Risk, Cloud Health, TSO, and our own, very own AWS application discovery service for discovery. There's a certain level to discovery that it can do. Guys, there's no magic wand to these things, right? You need to know your application. You need to know what your application consists of. You need to have some sort of list. And if you have that in front of you, things like these discovery application services can help you tremendously in migration planning. Then server and database migrations, Adadata, Cloud Endure, Cloud Velox, Velostrator, as well as our very own server migration service, which I'll touch on, and database migration service. Database migration service, I might add, has really been that good that we've been using it you can use it for migrations from Oracle to SQL, not just SQL to SQL, not just SQL from on-premise to SQL in AWS or to RDS, but you also migrate it over to less expensive enterprise databases such as Aurora or, and so on. So you can just push this information wherever you want to. And it's been so good because it does no downtime type migration, which means continuous migration. That people have been using it as a replication tool and as a DR tool between their multiple sites and so on. So it's really that good, from that aspect. It does work mostly for .NET applications and stuff. I wouldn't use it for things like Exchange and and SharePoint and so on and stuff. Just adhere to the actual common migration approaches on that side. Data transfer, Eternity. We have S3 transfer acceleration. We also have our appliance, which is AWS Storage and File Gateway, which you basically can just plug in with your SAN, and it can just go ahead and take whatever stuff you're kind of storing and replicate it over to AWS continuously. You can use Snowball. Snowball, have you guys seen it? It's kind of it's a device like this. You plug it in, and it's really more for like petabytes of data that you transfer over quickly from your from a data center over to AWS. And then, if that's not enough, then you have Snowmobile. And that really, you can literally back up, like, I don't know, like the entire or something. I'm joking. But like immense amounts of petabytes. Put it on a truck. That's a truck. And if you were here at reInvent last year, brought in the truck at the actual keynote. It was funny as hell. And you plug in, you put in all the data on the truck. We drive back over to our data center, and we make it available for you in AWS, which is freaking awesome. And then Direct Connect. Direct Connect I mentioned as a way of having a dedicated line over to us, to have a 10 gig or 1 gig line, and we know it doesn't go internet or anything like that. Use BGP. A lot of the times people use that for the data transfer only during migration, and they cut it afterwards. So you can just use this dedicated line for that period and all that. You don't have to like commit yourself all the way. And Kinesis, which allows the real-time data transfer. We use it. I use it. When I say we use it, I use it primarily for like log transfers and log aggregation from multiple sources, because it allows you to do in-memory process of these massive amounts of data and makes them available to whatever needs to read it or whatever needs to kind of hook into the any of the events that might be there. And then there's like the usual suspects application. You can write your own agent that actually sends stuff over to CloudWatch, or you can go ahead and use something like AppDynamics, Dynatrace, New Relic, and so on. You can even use, Datadog and stuff. There's only so many I can fit on the slide. You say, hey, Zlatan, what does this typical migration look like for you? So first thing that we do is we establish a landing zone. Right? You'll hear that a lot from us, right? Which is effectively just setting up the full network infrastructure on this side. That means setting up a VPC, establishing a range, setting up the subnets, establishing a VPN or direct connect, and so on. So that's going to be a landing zone where all of our stuff ends up. Next thing is we do security. We establish what security groups we're going to be using. For those of you that don't know what security groups are, they can be attached to a single instance or multiple instances or entire fleets of servers, and they effectively are like proxy rules. You have protocols, you define what type of ports and what type of protocols will be allowed, and you establish a range of single IPs or whatever that are going to be allowed to access it, how they're going to be allowed to access it, quite simply. A lot of our customers really rely on security groups all the way through. It's literally just ingress and egress. What's really important is that we have made it very friendly for Microsoft workloads. So you'll find that in selection things like MS SQL protocol. You can just select it and use it and stuff like that. You'll see through our cloud formations that we have like domain members groups with already pre-created rules that you guys can reuse. There's a lot of things that we have that you can just start using straight away. And Active Directory, we talked about it here. That's the first thing that you need to establish. Good thing about it is that you don't have to necessarily extend it. You can have AWS Active Directory running, and you can establish a one-way trust without having to lose your mind over with your security team and your Active Directory team, which might be resistant to like, oh yeah, we don't know what's going on there and all this sort of stuff. So you can provide Active Directory access in a very secure way that doesn't affect any of the on-prem Active Directories or domain controllers in any way. You can then set up SQL Server, whether you're setting it up on EC2 or on RDS. And then you can set up web servers and your app servers. Then you will be serving most of your traffic now still through the DNS to your on-premise web service. And when you're ready, you can just cut off to production. You can ensure your final replication synchronization occurs. You can run these tests before you cut over. I'm not saying go ahead and test it the first time. A lot of the times, the same way you would be testing like a DR continuously and stuff, you can test this thing out. Once you're ready, once you have your runbooks in place, once you have your rollback procedures in place and all that sort of stuff, you put it on. And by the way, your rollback is very simple. All you have to do is just put it back in, right? Just switch it back here, and that's your rollback. And put it back in there and whatever. And your end users won't know at all that they switch and they exclusively now work in AWS. And that's probably the best thing that this thing brings to the table. The honorable mentions around the server migration service here. Right now we have support for VMware, but we will have support for more things. Please keep an eye on all things. Honestly, most of the migrations that I've been doing from virtual environments have been from VMware for clouds. Important things to mention here. It's agentless, one thing. So you don't have to like preload the agent on the whole thing. Second thing is it can capture incremental change made to on-premise VMs. This was one of the things that was a question from most of the customers, and it was a must. And most importantly, it can migrate a group of VMs simultaneously and orchestrate multiple migrations with this thing. So it doesn't have to be sequential and stuff. So it is a very sophisticated service, a part that allows you migration of VMs over. Okay. Not too happy about these type of migration. This is if you just want to get rid of your data center really quickly and you don't want to have it in there. Most of the time, we like to have and use an opportunity to refactor some of the aspects of your applications. This is what we call forklifting. You know, not the best thing, but if necessary, yeah. If in transition, it's something that we would do and then we would refactor it for you going forward, that is a good strategy, right? And this is really the kind of the migration hub goes and takes all of those third-party services as well as our services. It gives you option using third-party or our services and goes through the same thing: discover, group, migrate using tools, whether it's outside or our own, and track application migration status. And that is AWS Migration Hub. It allows you to track and plan, actual migrations. It allows you to, have full control of it and look at the progress and the whole thing. And you can track it really through our dashboard and all that. And you can extend this dashboard to a lot of things. As you can see, it can show you which ones have not started yet, which ones are in progress. You can see patterns of things that have gone wrong and deduce what's actually happening and causing things to go wrong and stuff like that, especially. But and it will allow both to spot these things and to quickly remedy them, and also implement perhaps better things and ways of speeding up the same migration. This is the same slide I had before. Honorable mention for that. Last year, I did a 400 session with my colleague Scott McDonald about actual migration by means of always on. So we would have just extend always on to do asynchronous commit, asynchronous remote replica over to AWS, and then we would kind of build out, add additional nodes over there, and then we would kind of build out the actual application and web front-end side of things and do the same cutover that I was showing you early on. This would allow very seamless actual transition or migration for anything that supports always on. So whether those be .NET application, whether that be, SharePoint server migration or something like that, this is a much easier, much better way to do it. It doesn't require any type of downtime. You don't have to have downtime mitigation plans or anything like that. You don't have to have maintenance windows and so on. Next thing, this is all great, but how do we simplify our .NET development? I've been working with a lot of .NET development teams. Some people in the audience that I see know I was working with them actually on it recently. We've been working literally on simplifying how the .NET users look. They're like, oh yeah, this is AWS, maybe it's not that friendly, maybe we don't do so many things. The overwhelming thing has been that there's a lot of things that have simplified a lot of aspects of the development, and there's been support for just about anything they wanted to do. So first things first, get AWS Toolkit for Visual Studio. Install that guy. It's absolutely awesome. I've been impressed ever since I found out about it. I'm a huge Visual Studio nerd. Having seen how well this integration has been made and how well the templates have been made, how it allows me not only to develop the .NET projects the way I've been using them before, but more importantly, how it allows you to extend it using our serverless services to basically simplify it, to take out any aspects that were complicating it or that were making it more bloated and all that sort of stuff, right? And also that would allow it to be more available, more scalable, and needless to say, faster. So our code services is really how we do the CDCI for development of any aspects, and that's no different than for the .NET application. Code commit have to be on a source side. Code commit, it can be GitHub, and it can be TFS. It can be VSTS. In VSTS, you can actually go ahead and you can get an integration with AWS. TFS, you can do the same with a toolkit. All you have to do is just point it to an S3 bucket. That S3 bucket can have an event that goes ahead and initiates the process. So instead of source, it can be an S3 bucket that initiates the process with AWS Code Pipeline. Code Pipeline is our CDCI pipeline that we have developed and used it at Amazon. Then we brought a lot of our customers to see how we do things. And then they said, what is this awesome thing? Can you please make it available for the rest of us to use it? And then we made it a service. So it was our own thing that we developed, our own baby that we used for development of things Amazon, and that we made available to you guys. It integrates not only with our services, but with a whole bunch of third-party services. For build, we have Code Build, which actually does perform fairly straightforward, easy build action using containers, and it will do it for .NET as well. You can use it also for test aspects, and then Code Deploy it really is there for deployment into any environment, whether that be a test QA or the production environment afterwards. Both Code Build and Code Deploy use something called app spec and build spec file. And the app spec and build spec file are so simple. Literally, you just have events like before install, after install, before, you can define even to install or check if a web server has been installed, whether it's running, whether it needs to recycle application pools, whether it has to do any of that, where the files need to be copied and all that. And it's literally, it took, I sort of got a couple of minutes for most people to start working with these and start editing them. That's how they simple are. Because it says, this where in the package is your file, where do you want it to be? Bam, you just put in the actual path, that's it. That's all they had to do. And you just, for each of those events, you have to put it in. It's very simple. Our service reads that in the package itself. So that app spec.yaml or build spec for build and app spec for code deploy are in the package itself. Our service reads it and those instructions to the service to do what it needs to do. Very straightforward. Codestar. Check out the Codestar services, guys. This thing is awesome. Not only can you can actually go ahead and select something, the ASP.NET Core web application or web service, and it will create the entire CDCI pipeline for you. And it can use GitHub or Git or Code Commit. It will use Code Deploy, Code Build, and code pipeline over all of it, and it will create a dashboard for you with all of this. It will show you how these things are. It will seed it with a mock or test .NET project, and you'll be able to change that project, add things to it, and see live how it's going through the entire pipeline and how it gets deployed. And you know what? You can just replace that entire project with your own .NET project and watch it all the way to the production service or to the container, whichever way. So how can we further, now we know how to simplify the development, right? We have the toolkit, we have all these things, we have Codestar, we have the entire CI pipeline with full sophistication of any CI pipeline, of any CI pipeline should have, and we can also integrate into our own well-known TFSs and VSTSs, right? So how do we simplify now the architecture? Key thing here, Lambda. Lambda is making everything possible. It is an ultimate cheat code in my book for anything. Literally, it's a serverless service. It's stateless. It's serverless. You don't have to worry about anything. You don't have to manage anything. It's a piece of code that gets it. You just write a piece of code. You say, okay, there's a payload given to Lambda, and you say you can parse it. You can do whatever you like with it, and you can talk to whatever you like, to API you wanted to talk, anything you wanted to do, you can do through AWS. You don't have to worry about whether you have enough of them in separate availability zones. You don't have to worry about, whether they, whether they're available, whether they have the right performance or anything like that. Those are the things that we worry about once you actually design and deploy it up to your specs. So any event, any change of data state, any endpoint, any API event will shoot off the Lambda function, which will be written in C#. There are a number of services that you can use in a serverless architecture to replace many aspects of what you do. A lot of application tier in your .NET applications, a lot of the bloated, I want to say, store procedures and so on, you can replace with what Lambda does instead in a very effective, performant way. You can use something like Amazon API Gateway that actually provides RESTful endpoint to anything that you want to build without you having to build one. It's literally, it's equivalent to a managed service that you can just bring up for any of the events that you have in there. So I've used it not only to create services, but also to do things like encapsulate legacy services, SOAP services, and get, put Lambda endpoint, the API gateway endpoint that talks to Lambda, and then the Lambda will be talking to the SOAP service and then talking back and forth to whatever application it needs to talk to. Whether it's internally, whether it needs to be exposed for any B2B to your external partners, or any other you may be running externally or so on, right? So what does that kind of look like? So here's the thing. So you can just as easily replace Lambdas with C# over here that you see. You can actually replace them with containers that they are running. And really, Lambdas in the background, which is something you don't know. It's only we know. They're just containers that are running in the background that we run them. And you can just the same way run ECS with containers. They can use API Gateway. They can use things like step functions, which is effectively a workflow. So if you think like API Gateway is kind of what WCF was, but hell of a lot simpler and easier to create. Step functions is what Windows Workload Foundation was, but hell of a lot easier. Very simple schema-based language that allows you to create, and in each step either manage a state machine workflow, in each step either initiate or use Lambda, or allow an activity to interact with code that might be running, let's say, in a container or elsewhere on another server that needs to inform workflow what's going on. You can use the simple queuing service for queuing, and you can use simple notification service. More importantly, not only can the SNS talk to services, to other service points and communicate, but it can also send emails, and it can send SMSs to your phone based on any of these things. So it can really kind of, decompress and take away most of the complexities out of your current applications. If you look at a lot of these services that we have, they stack on and on and on. We have a lot of them that we can use. You can dynamically allocate them, use them. When you don't use them, you switch them off like a light. It's gone. You're not paying for it. Lambda is notoriously cheap. Someone was saying, can I shoot off Lambda every minute? How much will it cost me for a month? It turned out $3 or something insanely low. I can't remember exactly, don't hold me to it. But it was something that was laughable. And so these are the things that you really want to, if you want to kind of save money, want to save on things, please do that. When it comes to serverless applications, this is kind of the CloudFormation. I talked about the CloudFormation for how it looks like. This is what the YAML for the CloudFormation services would look like. For the serverless applications, we simplify the CloudFormation even more, right? These are all the things that you need to put in, all the dependencies, all the details around configuring your servers and stuff like that. However, we developed something called Serverless Application Model with AWS SAM, and we have a squirrel. Squirrel is the Sam the squirrel. So, and that's a much shorter thing. So that entire thing is now only this block in CloudFormation. It's now called a SAM template, and you just define a function. You say what the way the code is sitting. In this case, in an S3 bucket. You define what the handler is, runtime, and then you say, event is API, and the path method is any. It will automatically create API gateway with a service endpoint for this function that we built, and then I'll just define a table, and we'll automatically create a simple table in DynamoDB for me. So this is it. We have extremely simplified the serverless application deployment, which takes part of the pipeline. For the pipeline that I showed early on. So in this case, it also uses it can use code commit, it can use, TFS through S3, or it can use, GitHub and so on. And then the build process would also go through code build, but then deploy testing and all that would go through CloudFormation. So we would build these services through CloudFormation, whereas, normally we would just point it to like EC2, where we want the code to be deployed and all this sort of stuff. There's no instance to point it to, so we do it through CloudFormation, deployment and testing. So check this out in more detail when you do get a chance. Last but not least, Simplified Management. So now we have got rid of legacy code. We have simplified our architectures, made them more nimble, made them a lot cheaper to run, and made them more available and a lot resilient than it used to be. We have simplified our architecture. We've simplified our infrastructure. We have simplified how we deploy things in tremendous way. So now, how do we do things? So enter System Manager. So a System Manager. I was waiting for this to happen. Had this bug going on before. Has things like a State Manager, which is kind of this desired state configuration server. It has run commands, where it allows you to run a same script or same command that you type in PowerShell to multiple fleets of servers that you have in there. You can establish maintenance windows. You have patching for all of your windows. You can literally define in Patch Manager what KB articles you want to use and which fleets of servers you want to apply which KB articles to, and so on. And you can do that also through run commands. See, it's fighting me. You can have full inventory management. You can use parameter store, which actually allows you to also securely store secrets, any secrets that you make, because it allows you to encrypt any of the data that you put in there, or just keep general data that may be needed for your applications or for your maintenance and running your service. So I'll win this. We had the same issue. The guys know this thing is going crazy. So luckily we're right at the very end. You can then pipe all of the, in addition to what CloudWatch has, from a CPU, disk utilization, and so on. That's it. It says that. Thanks, guys. Let me try and see if I can go back. We only have a few minutes. We're right at the very end, thankfully. So. Let's try this again. State Manager can ensure that configuration is maintained on all of your servers, even if they don't have the specific configuration. They can make sure that any servers that are being released or created in the whole environment are domain joined, and they have whatever they need to have. And if somebody changes it, you can change it back. Like somewhat like desired state configuration. So maintenance window, like I said, works with a patch manager. Automation. I work with the system manager product group specifically on things like AMI patching of AMIs rather, and all that sort of stuff. So updates to AMIs, not just patches, but also making sure that they pull all the necessary data to bring up the launch configuration when it comes to auto scaling much faster than you normally. And AMI up is important case, like updating your image, any image that you may be using for or any of your applications that you're using in that case. All of this is really based on documents. So those documents can be used by run commands. It can be used for automations. It can be really used for anything. And you'll see them if you go to your console, EC2 console, and then you scroll on the left-hand side of it, you'll see all the system manager aspects that I'm showing you right now, and you'll see, most importantly, documents, and you'll see that we've created a whole bunch of them specifically for Windows management. So I implore you to take a look at those. You can literally manage everything about your farm through the systems manager, right, in a very secure way without even having access to any of these. Any of your servers. And this is a tremendous thing that you can do for yourself. And you can make use of things like SNS topics and so on. You can hook onto the events. And more importantly, you can automate any action. So any administrative action that you know will happen based on some specific error that is going to come across, a specific issue that you register, and that can come through either any type of log, you can automate it, and you can say, ahead and perform this to auto-fix it before you even notice that it happened, right? So I talked about the actual CloudWatch metrics. You can create custom metrics, whether you're using third parties, whether you create your own, and you send all of your, application log files over to CloudWatch, and then CloudWatch can either shoot it through Kinesis and make it available in something like Redshift, which is data warehouse, or it can just over directly to any type of dashboarding service or anything like that. And I'll show you what that looks like just now. It can start off workflows. It can send an email. It can send SMSs, and so on and so forth. So everything kind of converges onto the CloudWatch, and CloudWatch integrates into everything. And that's really what's important to understand. CloudWatch, it has direct pipes into, whether it's Kinesis, whether it's directly to Elasticsearch, for those of you that prefer like Elk stacks, and you can use Kibana to show you how, everything is performing on your side. You can use Amazon Quick Start as well to go ahead and view. I don't know, it uses our Spice engine, the in-memory processing. It's BI. For those of you that are Microsoft TCA, it's kind of like Power BI. It's our answer to it, so go check it out. It's just as easy to use. SelfService BI, we call it, right? And then, more importantly, what I do a lot for the DevOps teams and so on, is that I get those events out to Slack or to Teams or to HipChat or whatever you may be using. And they can also, because we webhooks and stuff, through API gateway, they can also go ahead and send commands back to their own fleets of servers, to their own AWS infrastructure, to AWS services, and tell them to do. An example that I do very often for the SecOps teams is anybody makes changes to security groups, right? Those will immediately pop up in the SecOps chat group, and it will notify the SecOps admins and all that, and they can go ahead and they can send a command back that actually asks them to, thanks, yeah, well, at least it lasted this long. They can send back commands and tell them to either restore the groups the way they were, or they can do other changes to the infrastructure or to the application directly from Slack, HipChat, or Office 365, using that, or whatever the case is, right? Anyway, thank you so much for coming. If you have any questions, I will step outside and I will take the questions. I got in 1 minute as soon as this thing ends. I hope you picked up all the ways that you can simplify Microsoft workloads in AWS. And my email is my name @Amazon. So it's Zlatan, first name @Amazon.com. It's not because I'm very important. I'm just the only Zlatan in the whole Amazon for some reason. So please go ahead and hit up. You can see me also on Twitter, Zlatan Zinik, and same for LinkedIn. Please go ahead, follow me. Let's add me on LinkedIn. I'd love to stay in touch with all of you. Thank you very much.